On today's episode, the Blackhawks swap draft picks with the New York Islanders. I'll talk about who won the trade and whether Patrick Kane could be coming back to Chicago.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Just a quick reminder, if you're watching on YouTube right now, hit that like button. Comment down below as well as to your thoughts on the Blackhawks trade with the New York Islanders from Friday, whether you think the Blackhawks or the Islanders won the trade, and also your opinion on the rumors that maybe Patrick Kane is coming back to Chicago, a potential return with the Blackhawks. I'll be talking all about that during segment 2 on today's episode, so make sure to stay tuned until that point. I also got to let you know real quick that today's episode is sponsored by Indeed, the only job site out there where you only pay for applications that meet those must-have requirements and standards. Start hiring right now at Indeed.com/lockdown. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Getting right into it here, Friday afternoon. I'm actually, for those of you who have been tuning into episodes this week, you know I'm down in Texas right now covering a golf tournament, so I do apologize that the scheduling has been a little bit irregular this week. I'll get back into the Chicagoland area on Monday morning. Hope everyone's having a lovely Memorial Day weekend thus far as well. I'll be getting back to Chicago on Monday morning, and I'll get back to my structured schedule. I'll have 5 episodes coming out next week. Don't want to be missing out on any more because there are loads of prospects to get into. But anyways, Friday afternoon, I'm out on the golf course right by the first tee box. I look at my phone. I get a notification that the Blackhawks made a trade. I go, well, what? This early? What are we doing here? And I see it's only involving draft picks, but that's a little bit even more interesting that there weren't any players involved, just picks being traded so far removed from the NHL draft. I mean, yeah, it's, we can see it coming, but it's still a month away. And usually you don't see these types of trades going down this early. Breaking down the move here, the Blackhawks sent picks number 20 and 54 and 61, the 20th overall selection in this year's draft, along with 2 second-round selections, numbers 54 and 61, to the New York Islanders in exchange for the 18th overall pick in this year's draft and the 50th overall selection as well, which is a second-round pick. So basically, to sum this up in layman's terms, the Blackhawks moved up from 20th to 18th in the first round and from 54th to 50th in exchange for the 61st pick. They send that to New York as the price of doing business, moving up 2 spots in the first round and 4 spots in the second. Whether this is a win or lose, my initial reaction, I will say, this is kind of the value of the Blackhawks having a luxury of draft picks over these next couple of years. But it did feel like, I will say, a little bit much to give up for essentially only moving up 2 spots in the first round. Yes, jumping up 4 in the second is notable too, but the first round, especially because this year's draft it's a good draft, but it's not nearly as deep as the year prior. The real prize winner here for the Blackhawks is moving up from number 20 to number 18. And even if the Blackhawks do have a boatload of picks, feels like they could have squeezed a little bit more out of Lou Lamoriello here in this deal, maybe gotten like a 4th round selection or something, like a 5th, to maybe make ends meet a little bit more. So in terms of like the value perspective, I think the Blackhawks giving up the 64th overall pick maybe was a little bit much here. But what I will say is, because as I referenced, this was a deal only involving draft picks. Usually we see these occur on the first day of the draft, the second day, or at least when the draft is going on, not a month before. So I feel like this is a move to make another move. I feel like Kyle Davidson has some planned in mind here, and we should probably wait until everything is finalized. I really believe something else is going down. And until that happens, I think we should kind of wait to rush to judgment, because we obviously don't even know who these players are going to turn into. We don't know who the Blackhawks are going to be selecting at number 18. Should they hold that pick? Who they're going to be picking at number 50 now? How they're going to develop in a couple of years' time? All these things really do matter when you're actually weighing how this trade is going to look, and we won't know that for a couple of years down the road. So I wouldn't be too invested into just swapping these picks in this deal right here the second, because I really do feel like Kyle Davidson has something else on his mind. But yeah, I do also agree with the people who are like, maybe this wasn't the best value move by KD, giving up the 61st pick. Still a second round selection to move up, like I said, just 2 spots in the first round. I don't know. So some people think it's a good move for the Blackhawks. Some people think it's a bad move. To me, like I said, what I think is just the most clear is that Kyle Davidson, he likes making moves during the draft. I mean, he's staying aggressive is basically my key takeaway here, and that shouldn't be surprising. I talked about this on the show a couple of weeks ago. We've seen Kyle Davidson, in his first draft as the full-time general manager for the Blackhawks. Chicago started that day with 0 first-round selections. They wound up with 3. And then, he wanted to make a move last year to go and get Oliver Moore as he was sliding. Wasn't able to get anything done, but was just fortunate enough that he ended up falling into their laps at number 19. And it just feels like Kyle Davidson's establishing this forte that these are the kind of moves he likes to make around draft time. And now that he has all these picks in his arsenal, I wouldn't even be surprised to see him ratchet up even more here. So we're going to see what winds up happening. And also one thing I wanted to add in there too, I've seen it referenced by Charlie Roumeliotis and some other Blackhawks beat writers or folks in the scene. Maybe Kyle Davidson does feel like there's a gap from number 18 to number 20. Maybe he feels like that's when the value kind of starts to fall off in the first round, or maybe this is just a way for him to get a better asset to potentially move up a few more spots. Number 18, let's say someone like a Cole Iserman falls to number 11 or number 12 or number 13. 18 is more enticing than number 20, especially if, GMs or scouts, I don't know if this is the case here, but if there is kind of a gap after that 18 spot, then certainly that pick is going to be more enticing for other general managers. But like I said, we'll see what winds up happening here. But my main takeaway is GMKD remains aggressive, foot on the pedal in the offseason, as we've seen since he's taken over as general manager. With his draft picks, the Hawks move up from number 20 to number 18 and number 54 to number 50 in the second round as well, in exchange for the 61st overall selection in this year's draft. All right, there are my quick thoughts on the Blackhawks. Swapping draft picks with Lou Lamoriello and the New York Islanders on Friday. Not a move that I think anyone saw coming this early before the draft. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, another intriguing topic of conversation is I'll get into the latest rumors surrounding a potential return for Mr. Patrick Kane. But first, I do need to talk to you all quickly about Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish that you could handpick the best stars for your roster? Well, if you're building your talent roster, then you need Indeed, because Indeed is the only job site out there where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. So instead of spending multiple hours on countless job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need to use the one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all, and that is Indeed. Indeed streamlines the hiring process with powerful tools that find you match candidates in an instant. And again, I personally love Indeed because it's the only job site out there where you only pay for applications that meet those must-have standards and requirements. And Indeed knows that when you're growing your business, you got to make every dollar count. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job scores combined, according to Talent Nest and according to ComScore. Indeed is the #1 job site worldwide. So go and start hiring right now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon to find quality applications that meet your hiring criteria right here, right now. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Segment 2, Scott Powers of The Athletic stirring up the pot here recently, Blackhawks fans, is an article that he posted on X where he was answering mailbags, questions from Blackhawks fans, as I like to do here on the show. Just a reminder, Mailbag Monday is right around the corner. Go and drop your question that you want answered live on the show in the comment section down below. You can also go and throw it up in the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. You can email me at lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. Slide into any of my DMs. Reach out with your questions. I'll be sure to answer them on Monday's episode. But yeah, Scott Powers in one of his latest mailbags referenced that the Chicago Blackhawks haven't ruled out bringing back Patrick Kane this summer. And as soon as that news breaks, there are a slew of Hawks fans out there clinging to that, wanting Patrick Kane to come back. He's set to be an unrestricted free agent again here this summer after, of course, joining on with the Detroit Red Wings around the midway mark. Played a little bit more than half of the season with Detroit, being nearly a point-per-game player, really establishing himself that he can, still play at the top of his game. 47 points in 50 games for the Red Wings this year, 20 goals and 27 assists. Unfortunately, though, the Wings, despite a really chaotic and fun, entertaining end to their season as they were trying to creep their way into the Stanley Cup playoffs, unfortunately for them, they wound up falling just short, and Patrick Kane misses out on playing playoff hockey once again, and now set to be an unrestricted free agent. There's questions about his future. Is he going to go back to Detroit? And of course, the natural reaction from Blackhawks fans as he's set to hit the market is, could we see Patrick Kane now, a year removed after it was pretty clear the Blackhawks weren't going to be bringing him back? They weren't interested in signing him. They kind of wanted to go in a new direction with a new leadership group, considering all the youth that's coming in. But now, after Connor Bedard has a year under their belt and seeing that Patrick Kane can still play effective hockey, I mean, really, really good stuff out of him with the Red Wings in big-time moments, too. Like, he was scoring classic big Showtime goals. Of course, there was the return to Chicago where he gets the overtime winner and is hyping up the crowd, sending the Blackhawks fans in a frenzy. I don't know if that many Blackhawks fans have ever cheered for someone in a Detroit Red Wings sweater. So there's obviously a lot of enticement there. There's obviously a lot to be intrigued by. And Powers mentioned that the Blackhawks front office will likely hold internal discussions over the next few weeks about the possibility of re-signing Kane, who's going to be turning 36 at the start of next season, but as I referenced, did look much healthier than he has been in quite a while after undergoing that hip procedure in the summer, getting time to rehab and, taking off the start of the season to make sure he's more than 100% ready to go. Yeah, he looked really good. It had been kind of multiple years since we had seen Patrick Kane look that healthy, be able to skate at the level that, we saw out of him in Detroit. So obviously, yeah, it looks like there's some more mileage on the tires there potentially for Patrick Kane in terms of his runway. But a couple of things here that I do want to get into as far as whether Patrick Kane could be coming back to the Blackhawks. First and foremost, I do absolutely recognize that it's more likely now than it was a summer ago, but I still don't think Hawks fans should be getting their hopes up and screaming for this to happen, because I still think it's kind of too early. The first thing that is the question in my mind is, Kane has to want to come back to Chicago. And does he? Maybe he does. I'm sure he loves the city. Obviously grew up here, had his first child here, really turned into a man here. And that's, other than the last couple of years, all he had known as a grown man. But the thing that comes back to me is the clock's ticking on Patrick Kane, man. I referenced 36 years old at the start of this season. And the Blackhawks just aren't at a point where they're going to be competitive this year. And I think a realistic, and this could even be too early, a realistic timetable for the Blackhawks to actually have a team that could gear up and make a playoff run, 26, 27 at the very least. They just still need guys to develop. Even if they do bring in free agents, they're still going to have to take time to mesh and establish that chemistry. Like, obviously, the Blackhawks, when they rebuilt last time and they went to the conference finals in 2008, 2009, and then won the Stanley Cup right away, usually it doesn't happen that fast. And I just think our expectations, I don't want to get our expectations too high that this thing's going to turn around in a hurry. And Kyle Davidson has even referenced time and time again, it is going to be a process. But again, 2026, 2027, at the very earliest, I think, is when the Blackhawks could be gearing up to make a run potentially. And Patrick Kane would be 38 years old at the start of that season. And it's, 3 years from now. So I'm sure he loves Chicago, the city, the fans, playing at the United Center when it's absolutely rocking, all that stuff. But if he's not able to win right away, does he really want to be here? And I know there's all those Blackhawks records that he could set and retiring as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. I love all that stuff. But right here, right now, personally, to me, it just feels like it's a little bit too early. It feels like, other than, all the memories and the nostalgia and being home, it feels like it's a little bit of a tough sell right here, right now, considering the path that the Blackhawks are on. And also, how does Patrick Kane feel about this new regime that, just sent him packing a year ago, when his comments would suggest maybe he didn't 100% want to leave Chicago? He understands the nature of the business. He's been around the block, but I still think part of that didn't sit 100% right with him. I think he understood it, but I think he would have loved to stay as a member of the Chicago Blackhawks, and it really felt like they were the ones that made the decision and weren't going to re-sign him or Jonathan Toews, obviously. So how does that sit with him? How's his relationship with the new regime? There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So while it may seem clear-cut and obvious now that he's playing good hockey, he's healthy, it's here in Chicago, I don't think it's as cut and dry as maybe it does seem. And also, you got to consider, would the Blackhawks want to make this signing? I know Patrick Kane had a really good season, but there is still a little bit of a risk there, coming off of a hip procedure surgery where we haven't seen a lot of guys really shine or play competitive hockey for long stretches after undergoing that surgery. Do they even want to bring him in? They already brought in Nick Foligno. They've re-signed Jason Dickinson. Yeah, adding veteran leaders, especially one like Patrick Kane, who's been there and done that, wouldn't hurt. But do they really want to integrate that with what they have going right here, right now, when everyone is always going to be thinking about Patrick Kane in the past and what he's done? We've seen players defer to him, on the ice. I don't know if that necessarily would happen, but these are things the Blackhawks front office is going to be kind of weighing on this matter. So I think there's just a lot of clarity and a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that's going to make this a little bit complex. You got to weigh Kane's visions, Kane's goals, along with the team's goals and the team's vision as well. There's a lot that goes into it. So I just don't expect it to happen this summer, Blackhawks fans, if I'm being very honest. Would I love for it to happen? Listen, Patrick Kane was my idol. My dog who lived 14 years old, I named him Kane in 2008. That's my guy. It would put a big smile on my face. But I'm not going to get my hopes up just because I don't know if the stars align perfectly in the timing for a comeback right here, right now. I'd love to see that number 88 sweater back in the Blackhawks organization. Of course, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it would be awesome for him to retire a Blackhawk, for him to set all those records. And I'm not going to rule it out down the road. But right here, right now, it just seems like a little bit of a long shot still to me, but make sure to go and hit the comment section down below. I'm sure there are Blackhawks fans that do not agree with me on this matter. Whether you agree or disagree, make sure to let me know your thoughts on this topic, this interesting stirring of the pot by Scott Powers recently in his mailbag. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. But there's my 2 cents on the latest Patrick Kane rumors, on a potential return of him to the Blackhawks. Coming up in just a moment, before I wrap up today's episode, I do still have to get into Ryan Donato's 2023-2024 report card. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A reminder to everyone watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And also, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports Today covers the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So make sure to go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button to the first first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, segment 3. We're starting to get down to the nitty gritty here in terms of Blackhawks report cards in the offseason. Again, if there's a certain player that I've gone over most of the notables at this point in time: Connor Bedard, Kurashev, Jones, Vlasic, Foligno, Kevin Korchinski, a lot of them. Most of the notables, Peter Mrazek as well. If there's someone you missed out on, want to see what grade I gave them for their performance this year, as long as the fans can easily find that on the 2024 report card playlist on my YouTube channel. Everything is also time coded down in the description, so you can easily jump to that segment. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Today, though, going to be getting into 28-year-old forward Ryan Donato's report card. His first year here as a member of the Blackhawks after inking that 2-year, $4 million deal last offseason, $2 million AAV. Kind of bounced around in his NHL career thus far. He spent the previous 2 years with the Seattle Kraken, had a small stint with the San Jose Sharks, the Minnesota Wild, started his career with the Boston Bruins as well. Hasn't necessarily found a home, as I think he's 8 years into the NHL now, but in his first year here with Chicago, I thought showed that he's a very good and versatile player. And while the productivity maybe doesn't jump out at you or anything, I thought he was a good guy who could go up and down the lineup. When he did get those rare little opportunities with Connor Bedard, he didn't play with him very much, but whenever Coach Luke Richardson hit that blender button and Donato found himself on the top line along with Bedsy, I thought he handled his own. He showed that he could play with a guy of that caliber with that skill. And at the same point in time, when he would go down to the fourth or the third line, I thought he still was one of the few guys down there that kind of found ways to chip in and still find ways to produce. And all in all, just kind of made the most of his opportunity here with Chicago, and a pretty good start to his Hawks tenure, in my opinion. Getting into the numbers here for Donato, 78 games played out of him this year, which was actually good for second most on the Blackhawks, behind only Jason Dickinson, who played in all 82. And it was actually the most that Ryan Donato has ever played in an NHL season. So like I said, kind of getting a real big opportunity here in Chicago. And I thought he did a pretty good job of making the most out of it. 12 goals, giving him double-digit goals in each of the last 3 years and 4 of the last 5 now. The only time he didn't was the lockout-shortened 56-game season, and those 12 goals were good for 6 on the Blackhawks. So someone who, in a bottom 6 role, even though, like I said, from time to time he got up in the top 6, majority of the time I would say he was on the 3rd or 4th line, someone who's proved that he can be a 10, 12, 15 goal scorers. 2 years with the Seattle Kraken. Prior to this one, he had scored 14 goals in each of them and had 16 in his first year with Seattle. So a good goal scorer, and he also chipped in for his most assists in his NHL career as well, with 18 this year. That was good for 5th on the Blackhawks, giving him 30 points, just one short of his career high. And the second time that he's ever hit 30, that was also good for 7th on the Blackhawks. 26 penalty minutes, a little bit down this year, actually, for him. He was in the 40s in the 2 years he played with the Kraken. Minus 14 plus minus rating, which is actually one of the better ones on the team, believe it or not. 1 power play goal, 10 of his came at even strength this year in 78 games, which I think is solid. And he also only shot 8.1%, and his career average was above 10 coming into this year, and he still got off a good amount of shots, the second most shots that he's ever had in a season. So maybe not even the most puck luck that he's had over the last handful of campaigns, still found a way to chip in for double-digit goals in his first year with the Blackhawks. An average 14 minutes of time on ice. That's the most that he's gotten in a year since 2018-19 with the Minnesota Wild. So mostly a 4th liner kind of with the Kraken, down in the 11 to 12 minute per game mark. Added in as well 24 block shots, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. It really isn't, but it is the most that Ryan Donato's ever had in a year. So maybe a little bit more willing, or just kind of found himself willingly or not, in shooting lanes more often, probably because the Blackhawks didn't have the puck very much, has a reason to do with that. But he also chipped in for 104 hits, which is a career high. That was good for 7th on the team. Added in 43 takeaways. That's a career high. I do think he was decent. He's an okay defensive player. That's never really his forte, but also I do think the Blackhawks, again, not having the puck very much, probably led to that. And then in terms of the analytics, actually pretty solid. 47.6 Corsi 4 percentage for Donato. Believe it or not, it's the first time he's been under 50 in his career. And As I mentioned, he's bounced around. He's been on a lot of different teams, and not all of them have been good. So, pretty good analytics, someone who regularly produces more offense than he does harm against his team defensively with his abilities. First time under 50 on this Blackhawks team, though, can't really hinder him for that. And 47.6% really isn't all that terrible. And neither is the goals for to goals against differential. 41 goals for at 5-on-5 for Donato was on the ice for to 55 against in 78 games. So not an absolute disaster defensively like some forwards for the Blackhawks this year, with a 90.2 on ice save percentage, pretty sound. So breaking down the good and bad here for Ryan Donato, I was actually pretty pleased with his season. I thought, first off, he was out there on the ice night in and night out, played in the second most games for the Blackhawks, basically in there every night, and had multiple different roles, all of which, I thought he fared well in. Maybe he didn't thrive or shine per se, but he was consistent and he played hard and took advantage of his opportunities. He had the second best offensive season of his entire career when giving a chance here with the Blackhawks organization, got his most ice time that he had since 2018-19, and played effectively in moments when he was up there with Connor Bedard, was one of the guys in the bottom six that could chip in from time to time. Just one of those Drake Kajula kind of Swiss Army knives that could give you a little bit of everything. More of an offensive-minded player for sure, but I thought defensively he was okay this season. It's never going to be his bread and butter, but he wasn't a liability out there. He had some good takeaways, and mostly he just works hard. He's a good skater, good energy guy, good intensity, inserts himself out there. So I was pretty happy with Ryan Donato's first year. And then as far as the bad, I really don't have anything bad to say because I thought he lived up to his role. He didn't really disappoint me in any area this year. I would say maybe he still hasn't carved out a natural role for himself. I still feel like he's a little bit of a tweener. And I know I kind of mentioned this a lot. I don't know why, but I felt this way about Philip Kurashev going into this year. Where does he exactly fit in on a good team? Sure, on a bad team, Ryan Donato can be a top six guy. But on a good team, you probably want him on the third line, but maybe you want him in a little bit more of a checking role. If you have him on the fourth line, he's probably playing with grinders there, and those aren't naturally fits along with him. And as I mentioned, the third line, he's not the most defensive-minded guy. So it's kind of hard to get Ryan Donato in the right spot. And I think that's led to him having so many homes over the years. But I do think there's just something about his game that I think when he does get in a right spot, I don't know if he's going to be a piece of the puzzle here in Chicago. It kind of feels like a 2-year cup of coffee for him potentially. But it feels like he has that potential that once he gets in the right spot, I really think he's going to shine and help a team out in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And maybe it's in a few years as a 30, 31, 32-year-old veteran. But I like his game. He's just still got to be in that right spot. But on a Blackhawks team that's going through a rebuild, I think he's a nice kind of little complimentary piece to have. He's not an impact player, I guess, is what I could say that was bad about him, but he is still a good role guy in certain spots. And like I said, I think he could be of value to the right team at the right time. So I just don't really have anything that bad to say about Ryan Donato because I didn't expect him to come in here and be like a 40, 45 point guy who scored 20 goals. I expected him to score double-digit goals, chip in for 20 to 30 points somewhere in there. Maybe I would have liked to see him take a bigger role on the Hawks' second power play unit, but they didn't get much of an opportunity this year, and the power play as a whole was a disaster. So not much bad for me to say about Ryan Donato. For that reason, I'm going to give him a flat B for his performance this season. Interesting, though, most of the voters out there didn't really agree with that. 48% of the voters on X gave him a C. That was the most popular option. 42%, the next popular vote was a B. And then the one that really got me, though, was 8% voting for D/F with only 2% voting for an A. And I don't think many people were going to give Ryan Donato an A. That's not what surprised me. It was that many more people giving him a D/F than an A. Why did Ryan Donato disappoint you? If you're watching this right now and you feel like Ryan Donato is disappointing this year, genuinely, please go and let me know why in the comment section. Was it something that I missed? Or do you agree that he had a pretty good start to his Blackhawks tenure? Feels like the voters are kind of on two different ends of the spectrum of the conversation here, and as far as this topic goes. So go and let me know what you have to say about Ryan Donato's performance this year, what grade you would give him, and if you don't already, make sure to go and follow at Talkin' Hockey on X so you can vote on these polls whenever I post them on X. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again, everyone, for joining me on the show. And make sure to go and follow at Talkin' Hockey on X, like I mentioned, and go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Sub to the YouTube channel as well. That way you can get all of the latest videos as soon as they're uploaded each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. If you want to find my personal account, you can follow me at Jack Bushman2. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. Enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully good weather everywhere, wherever you may be listening. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.